Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Well, welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Richard Dugan, Reverend Dr. D, and we are here today with Topper Taylor, the author of The Human Performance Intention Experiment. Ooh, we're going to play with Bunsen burners and test tubes. Oh, it's going to be fun. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, that's the wrong one. It's a quantum field framework. Hey, Topper, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. Always a pleasure.
I do have to ask, Topper, where does that come from, the name?
You know, I had my mom's OBGYN as I was coming out the chute said, "Here comes Topper," and it kind of stuck. I think she wanted to name me Christopher, but the name does not have an H, so it was kind of his nickname, and it stuck.
Well, I don't know. Christopher Taylor, that works too.
It works too. There's no question.
However, your name is Topper Taylor. I want to give out the website real quick here for folks. The website is intentions, plural, intentions.net. And boy, I'll tell you what, .net's been around for a long, long time. Of course, nowadays, boy, we got all kinds of almost whatever you want to create. You know, I could, during May, June, and July here in Santa Barbara, .fog for the marine layer. Well, as I made the comment,
actually, where you live, I like Cabernet Sauvignon.
It's not bad. Little long, but that's not bad. I like that. Although Merlot, that's a pretty good one too.
There you go.
Yeah, I have learned a lot about
Merlot is back.
That's right. I've heard a lot. I've learned a lot about wines and grape growing and harvesting and all that kind of thing, and learned about I've been to many tasting rooms over the course of the almost 19 years we've lived here in Santa Barbara. Learned about the tannins, and we even purchased a couple of oak barrels, empty, but used those for a little while before they fell apart. They don't last forever, but it's very interesting how we grow an affinity towards certain things in our lives. And one of them that I find interesting, and I like the title of this, The Human Performance Intention Experiment. When I think about human performance, I think, of course, when we talk business, of productivity. And I've heard a lot in the last few years about the economy is like the most important thing, which I disagree with. I don't believe that it is. Because if your population dies of whatever, you have no economy. Or if it diminishes, you have undone your economy. So your people, your community, your population, that's the most important thing that you should take care of. And when the influenza floats around the earth, and it does, as it is right now here in the United States, I was 15 years old, Topper, 15. And I knew that we should shut down the airlines for no more than 2 weeks. No more. Don't let people travel and spread it. If you have the flu, stay home. Make it mandatory because you and I both know as kids growing up, when we would go to school, if somebody had a cold or the flu, guess who got it? Everybody else. And that affects businesses and companies and factories. And when you have people who are not at 100%, the productivity has to drop. You cannot perform. I did an interview once where I actually dragged myself to the studio. And as I have the microphone pulled down towards the countertop, and I would raise my head and I would ask the question. And then as the guest, and this was when we did it on the phone. When the guest would be answering the question, I'd put my head down on the desk. I never aired that interview because a good friend of mine who reviews a lot of my programs, he says, you got some good questions, but it's not you. You don't sound good. So I never used it.
Hmm.
So when I think about this aspect of the human performance intention experiment, talk to us about what kind of performance are you referring to?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to kind of step back a second and let's frame this conversation. So, uh, first of all, I'm a business guy. I've spent most of my career in the media and entertainment industry and making a lot of kids' cartoon shows, things like Arthur and Caillou and Franklin the Turtle, which some moms and dads out there will know with little kids. Won a bunch of Emmy awards, and I think the what's really been interesting is for me, while getting a PhD in policy later in life, is kind of opening my eyes to this concept, kind of a new physics concept called quantum physics. And this kind of intersection of human performance, governance, and intention was introduced to me by a professor named Peter Robertson at USC in Southern California, where he said, ultimately, if you knew that your very thoughts could impact other people, would you lead an organization differently, govern differently, et cetera?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of stuck with me. He then went on to share a bunch of articles, et cetera, on this in the world of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and a unique phenomena called entanglement that exists in the quantum field. And so, for me, it was like a North Star. I started reading voraciously all of these interesting discussions around the subject. And ultimately, quantum physics, reduced to its simplest state, suggests that we're all connected energetically and particulately. At the end of the day, everything in the universe is made with energy and particles, and it all came from one place in a big bang. And so ultimately, we're all interconnected.
Hmm.
And if we use our mind, if we recognize that a thought is a snap of energy, it's actually a blast of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we recognize that we have about 85,000 thoughts in our head every single day, and that about 80% of those are negative. And so here we are walking around like a broadcast antenna. For those of you who remember broadcast antennas, that is broadcasting all of these negative thoughts, that's sending negative energy into, if you will, the quantum field.
Yeah.
Well, what happens if we really start focusing on changing those negative thoughts to positive thoughts? What happens if we not only started thinking positively, but actually started sending intentions, sending a specific positive thought to another person and asking them to heal, asking them to, perform better? And ultimately, this has been the subject of many, many studies, starting in roughly the 1970s. at places like Stanford University and Princeton and McGill College in Canada. And they started with, kind of a simple thoughts. They would take an energist. We all have an energy field. If we walked into an energy room that monitors our energy, you'd see kind of an orange, band around our entire bodies, right? And maybe if we've just come in from a 10-mile run, that energy level would be the heat level, the energy level that we'd be letting out is higher. Well, so is the energy level when we send intention. When we say when we're in that room and we say, I want to heal my wife who is ill, that energy level starts to increase. And like an athlete who's trained for a marathon, I could run a marathon too, but man, I probably wouldn't make it halfway without training. By training and training and training over the course of a year or two, I can actually run a marathon. Now, I may not be the fastest marathon
Mm-hmm.
runner, but I could complete a marathon.
I'll
And
be done
this
in a couple of days.
for exactly. And the same thing is true for guiding your intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So I can send an intention to you right now. But if I practice sending intentions and practice the art of sending a concerted energy thought to you over time, my intention will be more powerful. And arguably, according to some scientists, if I have 5 or 6 of us together sending an intention to a specific person for a specific thought, then that's arguably more powerful as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first early signs of or scientific experiments around intention were involved shamans, and shamans are simply people who deal with energy on a daily basis and have a practiced philosophy, life experience, business, arguably in the art of energetic sciences. And so their energy levels walking into that room that measures energy is already more significant than yours or mine. And
Mm.
they would take some seeds, let's say apple seeds, and they would intend for those seeds to be more productive, grow faster. And then they would take a control group of seeds from the same place, plant them, and see which grew faster and were more productive, bearing fruit. And of course, every time in hundreds of experiments, the seeds that were blessed with intention, received intention, grew faster and were more productive. So then we start talking about the phenomena of entanglement. And entanglement, simply said, is where you have this interesting particle right here in front of you that I influence somehow, maybe with my energy. And then simultaneously, without regard to time and distance, on the other side of the earth, a particle is influenced in the exact same way. And that's because they are entangled. So this concept, which Albert Einstein in the 30s called spooky action at a distance, and actually kind of poo-pooed, if you will, became the subject of 3 physicists in 2023 winning the Nobel Prize for Physics for entanglement. So dear Albert was wrong. And in fact, particles are entangled. And now we're experimenting with how to influence those particles so that we can have instant responses without regard to time and distance in a controlled environment. So now imagine taking those seeds with an energist, but having the energist be in Santa Barbara, California, and the seeds be in Melbourne, Australia. This is a true experiment that happened, where the energist focused his intentions on making those seeds more productive, planting them in Melbourne. He never touched the seeds. The seeds were on the other side of the earth, but his intention went to the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
When the seeds were planted, the trees who received intention grew faster and more productive, just as they would be if he held them in his hand. So now we're talking about an entangled particle living within the quantum field, which is based on energy, and sending an energy through this system all the way to the other side of the earth so that's received by the seed and the seed becomes more productive. Well, this is kind of fascinating, right? I mean, I'm reading this stuff as a skeptic, as a business guy. Not, I didn't have crystals in my house. I haven't gone to, ceremonies under the earth with with Native American, shamans.
Hmm.
I haven't done any of that. I'm actually coming at this with a skeptical eye, but I'm reading all the scientific evidence. It's like, this is kind of interesting. So we keep going. One of my favorite experiments was a guy by the name of Frederick Pioch, who's from France in about 1984. And what he did is he took an area like this frame that I'm in right now, and he had one of those vacuums, it was one of those kind of circular vacuums, those robot vacuums that
Hmm.
run on their own, and he programmed them to go north and south and east and west, perfectly covering this rectangle, in exact order, right? And the robot ran this pattern 2,000 times, and he had a candle on top of the robot, right, this whole time. Then what he did in darkness is he took baby chicks born into darkness out of the shell, and he put them on one side of this surface area in a cage, and he lit the candle. And as the robot went close to the baby chicks cooed and were happy. And as it started pulling away, the chicks chirped and were, viscerally upset that whether it's the heat or the light was moving away from them. The robot, over a period of 200 different turns, spent about 70% of its time in the quadrant that was closest to the cage. Why is that? Well, the
Hmm.
simple intention of a simple living organism, the chick, wanted that light to be near them. And that simple intention electronically reprogrammed that robot. Wow. Are you
Hmm.
kidding me? Is this like science fiction? No, it's not. So then, as a business guy, I started thinking, well, wow, how could intention impact human performance? And when you're at a university and you're trying to get your dissertation done, you have, three or four people that are professors at the university that are there to guide you, not only to be successful, but to actually get you through the process in a relatively timely basis. And so I had this grand notion of going to a group within, Amgen or Genentech that was working on the cure for cancer that for whatever reason had a block and they couldn't get it done. And I wanted to send intention remotely to those people to see if we could get a breakthrough. And they said, that's a great idea. Maybe you should do that after you graduate. But let's try something where there's a lot of data that you can analyze, so that you can create a direct correlation to intention and its impact on human performance. And that's what we came up with: sports. So what we did in our experiment was we had to get compliance from the NCAA, then we had to get compliance from the athletic department, then we had to get compliance from the universities, to make sure that we're working with students. Then we had to find a coach within the department who actually was open to the concept of sending energy to the student athletes to improve their performance. We chose a sport where there was not a defender. I call them non-defender sports. And that's a sport where someone's not trying to block you from performing. In
Hmm.
basketball, you've got a guy that's trying to block your shot. In football, you got a guy that's trying to tackle you. So what are those sports? Well, most of the Olympic sports, like track and field, is, for example, don't have someone trying to block you, nor does golf, nor does swimming. Well, as it turns out, the swimming instructor at the University of Southern California was quite interested in this area. And so we explained the experiment to all the students, got their permission, and we used some 25 swimmers, male and female, eliminated the freshmen who were just coming in, so you had to be there for 2 years. And we took all the data from their previous season and sent intention to this group of students. And then we had a control group with other students who fit the exact same specifications as the USC students within the Pac-12 at the time when Pac-12 existed, where you had Stanford and Cal and Arizona and a variety of teams, all that, they had to be sophomores, juniors, and seniors. They had to, swim in similar races and swim in similar pools, et cetera, et cetera. And we showed after over the course of a season with, hundreds of thousands of pieces of data that statistically, significantly, that those student athletes who received intention from a shaman remotely and an electronic intention device, which was created by a guy named Bill Tiller, who was a former professor at Stanford and kind of coined the phrase energetic sciences. Mm-hmm. Both student groups that received positive energetic intention over time improved their performance year over year and better than the control group that occurred within the student athlete pool of the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden now you've got, and by the way, these athletes are at the top level of their field, where 1 or 2 seconds makes all the difference to them in the world. It's the difference between getting gold, silver, bronze, or nothing. Mm-hmm. 1 second. Yeah. And so the idea of impacting them, who work out every day for 3 hours and have nutritionists and psychologists, et cetera, and who live a life of intention, having them actually perform at a little notch better is really significant in their lives too. And I think they were really excited to get the results, because what happened? The women's swim team appeared in the top 5 of the national teams for the first time in a decade and a half, and the men's finished in the top 20 for the first time in a decade and a half. And the coach of the women's swim team won Coach of the Year. So pretty exciting stuff. Now you got to sit back and you got to say, Richard, how can we use intention in our lives to, improve the health of the people around us, the communities of the people around us? How do we get positive governance, in our local city councils, state, politicians, federal politicians, et cetera. Very interesting stuff.
Very much so. We're talking with Topper Taylor, the Human Performance Intention Experiment. It's a quantum field framework, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is actually, I have to say, at first, as you started sharing about the Human Performance Intention Experiment, a quantum field framework, I thought, okay, we've already determined his actual name is Topper. Mom probably wanted to call him Christopher, but I think I'm listening to Sheldon. As you started talking about particles and so forth, and the thing that came to my mind was a phrase I use very often on this program, and this goes to my next question to you. I've said this over and over and over again to people. Words have power. So the question when it comes to sending that intention, whether it be from a shaman or from a device, what have you, is this something that needs to be verbalized or just thought?
It's a great question. So the real answer is just thought. However, when we think about what the words that are coming out of our mouths, it starts first as a thought. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. and our minds move so quickly that that thought electronically becomes the spoken word. So it's not the reverse. The words don't come out and then we think about it. Although sometimes it sounds that way.
Right.
But yeah. So no, actually, I agree with you. The words have an enormous amount of power, and one needs to think carefully before one speaks, so that one can be articulate and understand the audience that they're talking to. Yeah. But I mean, look, have you ever walked into a room? Maybe you're having a good day, you woke up, had a good night's sleep, cup of coffee, and you walk into a room and you feel like, my goodness, there must have been an argument here. There must have been something happening in this room because it doesn't feel right. So that's energy that kind of is sitting there from people who may have been in a verbal dispute, but their energy kind of still remains.
Yeah.
Another interesting experiment that's worth sharing with your listeners that is also fascinating and deals with this subject exactly. I believe it was Dean Radin, who is a scientist of note and a best-selling author, who conducted an experiment or observed an experiment. I think it was with Princeton, where they took an energy reading device
Hmm.
and they went to the Super Bowl, right? And they turned on the energy reading device, and of course the energy was through the roof, like at the highest point of this uh, gauge, if you will.
Hmm.
Then they went to a Rolling Stones concert, right? And of course, the meter was off the charts. Then they went to the pyramids in Egypt on a Sunday morning at 5 a.m. where there were no tourists, and the energy reading was also off the charts.
Wow.
And so, what that kind of begins to illustrate is to really understand that energy exists all around us. All this air that exists is actually kind of a subtle energetic field that we all live in. And over time, as we expend energy in a particular place, that energy has powerful, lasting consequences. And so, to get to the core of your question, which was how do we think or do we say intentions? One of the important obligations, if you will, for an intention sender is to find a place in your home where whether it's daily, and it can be for 10 minutes, or whether it's weekly, you find a place in your home that's consistent, doesn't have a lot of electronic devices around it, but where you can sit and intend and send intentions to someone quietly or verbally, doesn't matter, they're both the same, but that space becomes nurtured over time. And after you do this, let's say for 6 months or a year, the actual power of the intention being emitted is greater,
Hmm.
just like it would be going to the pyramids of Egypt on a Sunday morning.
There's an organization called Heart Math, as well
Yep.
as the Global Coherence. I'm not sure if it's a foundation or what have you. It's been a long time since I've had them on the program, but it was not long after September 11th, 2001. And of course, it was shared with me that they had these devices. They have more out, of course, now than they ever have. But back then, they picked up an energetic signal, maybe, I want to say, and I'm not going to say I'm accurate on this, maybe an hour or two prior to the events that took place in New York. And I'm wondering how you would define that energy prior to a major event, i.e., we'll use your football analogy. We've got, as of this conversation, we have is it the 59th football Super Bowl? And I'm
Well,
one
we do know it's the Eagles and the Chiefs.
we do know this, and I am wondering, it would be very interesting to see when the energy starts to ramp up over that, and it is a national event because there are historic implications involved. Not real
You know,
significant historic implications, but the historic nonetheless, according to by sports standards.
by the sport, defined by
Yeah,
the sport. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what I would love to do is just kind of share a thought that is on this topic, which
Hmm.
is home field advantage in football.
Okay.
So for those people who love football and those people who occasionally bet on football and see what the odds are, home field advantage generally has about a 3 point margin,
Hmm.
right? So the team that plays at home usually has a 3 point margin of performing better than the away team. Now, one has to just, when one sits back and thinks about that, well, why is that? The football field is exactly the same length.
Yeah.
The football itself is exactly the same size, whether you're home or away. The goalposts are the same size, whether you're home or away. So why is it that a team has home field advantage? Well, you could say it's the fans. Well, what
Hmm.
does that really mean? What's behind that, right? And what's behind that is energy.
Hmm.
That the fact is, not only do you have the fans in the stadium, but you have the fans surrounding the stadium. Let's say the Los Angeles Rams and the city of Los Angeles supporting their team in order to sending positive energies, hoping that they willing them to win.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so what's interesting is the Super Bowl is a little different, right? Because you're not at a home field, you're at a neutral field,
Right.
and you have two, cities in this particular instance, converging on, I guess it's New Orleans this year. And so what's interesting, and it would be an interesting subject for an experiment, is Kansas City, I believe, is a smaller city than Philadelphia.
Hmm.
So does Philadelphia have more fans than Kansas City? Well, Mahomes is so popular and the Chiefs, are trying to win three in a row that they probably have a lot of fans. Maybe they're AFC fans, from the conference. So you've got New York, you've got, up and down the, country, people that could be rooting for Kansas City for this game more than they would for just a normal, Sunday morning game.
Yeah.
And so my hunch is the energy levels are pretty similar for both teams,
Hmm.
and therefore it's going to be a good battle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really would be hard not to pick up significant energy levels, as you described earlier with this device, regardless of who you were playing. Um,
Yeah,
I'm wondering if the same device has been used in. Now, I know you referred to the pyramids of Egypt, but even many people in metaphysics would say that, well, but those are energy centers, and it would be understandable that your gauge would go off the scale in that regard. But what if you just went into, oh, I don't know, like a library? Or down in the lower levels of, say, the subway in New York City, or I guess they have subways in Los Angeles now. I'm not sure, but some less innocuous, if you will, or less
well, I think the point
travel
is,
areas.
yeah, I think the point is that where there are large, millions of
Hmm.
people, large groups of people that
Right.
flow,
Hmm.
there is energy.
Right.
And
Right.
over time, as we've talked about, if those people keep coming through that space and back to that space,
Hmm.
then the energy level in those areas increases, over time.
So it's sort of a
So
cumulative effect.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
It is both a cumulative effect and then a individual effect who if that individual is a practiced energist or a practiced meditator, I think that some scientists would argue that prayer is a form of sending intention.
Hmm.
The difference between, let's say, prayer and intention is prayer. You're kind of supplicating to a god versus sending something directly to the individual
Hmm.
historically, but one of my favorite quotes is the following: Witches call it spells, Christians call it prayer, spiritualists call it manifestation, atheists call it the placebo effect, scientists call it quantum physics. Everyone's arguing over its name, but nobody is denying its existence.
Yep. Yep. And what's interesting about atheists and the placebo effect, there was a beautiful 60 Minutes piece on that manifestation, if you will, where they had people who were a group A and group B. A was the control group and B was the placebo group. But this was a little different because this time the group that was receiving the placebo, as opposed to in past experiments where they were not told, they were told they were receiving the placebo, the non medication. And there was still a very high rate of impact as if they were taking the medication. Now,
Yeah,
that to me is
one
fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, so one of my favorite studies occurred in the last 10 years at the Cleveland Clinic, where they had an energist, an intentionalist, a shaman. They came and asked a group of people who stayed at home to focus their minds on exercise. So they
Mhm.
had them sitting on their couch at home, visualizing that they were at the gym on the treadmill, lifting weights for about 10 minutes a day. And over 6 months, their muscle mass increased. Not the same as if they went to the gym, but it did increase significantly. And I share this with you in consistent with your 60 minutes conversation. And it goes right back to the very basis of this entire dialogue, which is our minds are powerful, powerful, powerful machines, and they are connected to the universe and the people all around us.
Mm.
And we can actually have a tremendous impact, not only on our lives by creating muscle mass, by concentrating on the fact that we're exercising every day, but also with other people, their health, their wellness, their fortitude, and of course, athletes as well and their performance. We're really talking about something that has existed for hundreds of years in East Asian societies, like in India, et cetera, with meditation practices and Buddhist practices that are just now over the last few decades becoming acceptable as a means by which to integrate into a Western methodology of health and wellness. And I think that the combination of Western medicine and our minds and our meditative practices, our energetic practices are a powerful, powerful combination to live an extraordinary life.
We're talking with Topher Taylor. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Words have power. So watch what you say. The human performance intention experiment, a quantum field framework is what we're talking about here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, along with Topher Taylor, and you have opened the proverbial Pandora's box in this conversation for me. Okay, not necessarily for others, but for me, because the Pandora's box that you opened has all kinds of questions that are now floating around my head. And I've got to allow my intuition, that still small voice to say, okay, ask this one. No, no, don't ask that one. Believe it or not, I actually had an interview once where I was speaking with this woman and she was sharing and we were talking and conversing. And there was this question that came up. I don't even remember what it was. The interview was some time ago. And I just kept going. And the question kept coming up in the back of my mind. I'm going, no, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I mean, arguing with my still small voice in the back of my mind while I'm carrying on a conversation with this woman. And finally, I didn't literally stop the interview, but I said, look, I need to stop. And I have a question that it won't go away. I don't think it's relevant, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. And there we go. And I did. And it actually, I don't know how I didn't think it was going to fit, but it did. But when you talk about this aspect of energy, there is first of all, there's an element of Tesla was right that there is energy all around us and it is free and there is a way for us to tap into it. Now, whether he really discovered that, I don't know. All I know is that even earlier than that, I'm going to say 17, 18, maybe 1900 years ago, in one of what I call the ancient wisdom teachings, it was stated, this was the quote anyway, wherever two or more of you are gathered, there I am in the midst. And when I read that, the I am is not referring to some person. It's referring to that which was referred to in the Old Testament. I am that I am. Okay, the creator, the divine, etc., etc. So that, and of course, you also mentioned that this has been written about throughout human history, in those things that we are looking at. And now science, which is unfortunately up for scrutiny over its conclusions, which are never truly conclusions. It's just this is the answer we have today. As we continue to research,
There's
we
no
will.
question about it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Science is an art.
yeah. I love that. Science is an art, but it's one of those things that I thought about back on June 15th. Another a date for people who may or may not remember this. June 15th, 2015. I was watching the TV just like everyone else, and I saw what was unfolding, and I started hearing the words coming through the speaker on my TV. And my first reaction was, I don't care for this person. This is a bully. I don't want them there. And as time rolled on into the following year and so forth, I'm going, there is no way that a human being can continue to put out the kind of negative energy as I perceived it. Bear in mind, as I perceived it. They cannot continue down that path without it having some detrimental effects. So when you talk about the human performance, you never said, when you were talking about the one, what was it, the one university that did this test,
USC.
USC, you never said that the intention was for them to win. It was for
No.
them to improve their performance.
Yeah, swim faster.
Is
Swim
that
fast.
the?
And then what was interesting is that in talking to the coaches prior to setting the intention, I asked very specifically, what is involved in swimming faster? In other
Mhm.
words, how
Yeah,
do you get someone to swim faster? And it was a very interesting question because I'm not a professional amateur swimmer here or a
right,
professional
right.
swimmer, but nonetheless, uh, like being able to stay underwater longer where there's less friction than there is on the surface is
Mm.
one example. So
Hmm.
that involves having lung capacity and being able to, exercise underwater for a period of time. Another is being kind of relaxed, if you will, so not caught up in a panic, but that creates, a heart rate, a lower heart rate, so that you can, kind of swim consistently over a period of time,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Mental state would be another, of course. And so when one sends an intention, it's very important statistically that you are very specific. It's not swim faster. It's you know may I be of peace of mind. May I have the lung capacity too. May I swim underwater longer so that I can, the ultimate outcome is to swim faster,
Hmm.
right? And you raise a very good point about winning because at the end of the day, what we can control is ourselves, not necessarily the people around us,
Hmm. Hmm.
even though we can certainly influence the people around us, but we can control
Hmm.
ourselves. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is send an intention to someone so that they can live at their best capacity.
Right.
And their best capacity could be to win, but it also could be for them to actually swim a particular race, like the butterfly,
Hmm.
faster than they've ever swam it before, and that happened a number of times without them winning.
Hmm. They broke their own record, but they
That's
didn't
right.
necessarily win that particular
That's
race.
exactly right.
And that's really the point. And that also brings up another aspect, and that is that in any kind of competitive endeavor, whether it be in sports or elsewhere, you are going to have people in the first, second, third, fourth, and however many participants there are, you're going to have people in those positions. And somehow, some way, we in this country seem to think that it is the most important thing to be number one. And it's like, okay, so does that mean that two, three, four, five, etc., are inferior? No. It just means that maybe their intention wasn't this, that, or the other thing. And then, of course, it also depends on how you measure, these kinds of these parameters, these barometers, so to speak. Whether it is a race where you're running a marathon or swimming in the pool, or for that matter, even playing chess. You know, I know that when my father was teaching my brother and I when we were kids how to play chess, and he would take us on, and I think I may have won of the maybe hundreds of games we played. I may have won two or three, maybe two or three were a draw. But I know that when I noticed that I was quote unquote losing to my dad or even to my brother, I started to feel a certain sense of disappointment, of frustration that why can't I figure this out? I mean, there are only, you know, 7,362 moves that a person can make on a chessboard. There are only 64 squares, 8 by 8. I believe it is. I think it's 8 by 8. Anyway, um, and I know that if somebody is participating in something that like that, whatever it might be, those kinds of thoughts will come up that will then interfere with their ability to perform better than they did yesterday. Um, and just to wrap that up, my philosophy has been in my career when I've been asked about, oh, do you know what the other stations are doing? And I said, I don't care what the other stations are doing. My job isn't to compete with them. My job is to make us better today than we were yesterday, and tomorrow better than we are today. And it doesn't mean that there's a problem with yesterday or today. It just means let's just keep making innovations and making things more efficient if we can, or at the very least, stay at the bar that we're at today and tomorrow and the next day until we find a way to go a little higher and a little higher. Uh, and I think that winning and losing is sort of a losing proposition. I think that as you've described with the human performance intention experiment, it's about performance, not about winning or losing.
Yeah, it's one of the really interesting things about sports in general. And the I heard a very interesting talk with Deepak Chopra and
Hmm.
some of his family members a few months ago, where people talked about where the discussion evolved around sports being the new religion, and that's an interesting concept for a number of reasons, and that's because sport originally was invented for two purposes by society in Greece. One of them was to prepare the country for war. In other words, you'd create these athletes. You think about it: javelin throwing, chariot racing at the time, speed racing. You'd create these sports to prepare a country for war. And the second reason you do it is to create a healthy community, a healthy citizenry. And the Greeks believed that that intellectualism uh, would increase the healthier you were. And
Hmm.
so intellectual debates occurred at the gymnastique, which is the gymnasium.
Hmm.
So literally, when sometimes when we think today of the gym or Venice Beach, we think of great big, strong men and women, but we don't necessarily think about them as being, the top intellectuals of the day. In the Greek world, that's where they commingled and cohabitated.
Hmm.
The other interesting thing is if you think about even going back to the time of the Greco-Roman era, sports sets up rules,
Hmm.
and the rules are not different for men, women, Hispanics, blacks,
Hmm.
whites,
Right.
Asians. The rules are the rules. And even in those days, the rules did not change for ethnic minorities,
Right.
for wealth or poverty. They literally were guideposts where you had to perform within a certain field by certain rules. And so it was a great equalizer for all people to play on the same field together and for observers to watch and see who actually performed better.
Hmm.
Competition.
Hmm.
And so when you think about that today, and you think about, the opportunity for all of us to live in community and support each other, regardless of our backgrounds or
Yeah.
race or creed, et cetera, sports actually becomes a real enabler for us to see how that can occur in real life and in real time without prejudice.
Yeah. It's interesting that we're talking about this in the context of sports because there are only a few sports where, as you described, football, where you have those parameters. The area of play is exactly the same size at every location in the country or in the world. With the exception, and here in America, the top the two sports that I can think of that do not fall into that category. One of them makes sense that it doesn't, and that's golf. Every course is different, but the rules are all the same.
The rules are the same.
But there's one sport, the one I love so much, the one that gave me a World Series team and town that I can claim, my hometown, Phoenix, with the Diamondbacks in 2001. And that's baseball. Now, you'd think that every single playing field, I'll use that generic term for baseball, is the same, but it's not.
But the rules are.
The rules
And the
are,
distance between home and first base and second base and third base is the same.
but the
And the distance from the
outfield,
pitching mound to the home plate is the
true,
same.
but
And the
out,
number of players on the field are the same, and the positions are the same. So, yes, it's different to run a marathon in Greece as it would in London, as it would
sure,
in
sure,
Shanghai. But the fact is, the distance is the same.
is the
And
same.
everybody competing in that race, in that moment, is playing by the same rules.
That is true. However, in baseball, the outfield is not the same. The distance from the plate to the end of the playing field in the outfield, left,
But the
center,
two
right.
teams competing in that moment are playing on the same field.
I understand.
Yeah.
However, the statistics when it comes to home runs, for example, and even where they bounce off the wall and then they continue to play, um, are from my perspective, they're a little misleading. Now, this is a sidebar here in this conversation because the outfield is always different in every single field, and yet, I still love the game. At least I did until they started putting in things that made no sense, like a clock. Really, if you love the game, like golf, they have I think they have a time limit or something. But if you love the game, what difference does it make how long it takes? We have become we want too many soundbite sports, as it were. And that
Well,
to
the
me is,
ratings are higher for baseball than they've been in the last 20 years.
yeah,
And there was a lot of concern that the game was too long for all of us to appreciate. And so, to your point, I guess
yeah,
we're addressing popularism
yeah,
versus, core classic fandom.
exactly. By the way, I'd heard it said that if there's a ball game, a baseball game that's played, that actually the actual length was like 3 hours. But if you were to, and I know somebody did this, they took the video and they cut it up and they put all of the plays, the pitches, and everything back to back to back. I think the game only took less than 50 or 60 minutes, less than an hour. If you put that all together, and it's like,
Wow, amazing.
yeah,
There you go. Well,
but that's
maybe you should send that into Major League Baseball.
that's no fun. That's no fun. Because to me, one of the fun parts of any game and watching it is playing the manager or the coach in the armchair coach or manager, going, okay, What should we do now? Even though you're in now, this is an interesting experiment. What about a group of people that put out the intention, he ought to run this play, or he ought to go ahead and bunt as opposed to try to swing away and knock it out of the park, and so on and so on and so forth. Has anything like that been done in those kinds of specific?
I don't know, but it sounds like a good one where you send
Yeah,
intention to the coach to run a particular play. Why not? I think we should try it.
absolutely. Uh, Toper Taylor, the Human Performance Intention Experiment, a quantum field framework, and I'm Richard Dugan, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. The program we're talking about, the Human Performance Intention Experiment, has a website, Toper Taylor, and his website is intentions, that's plural, intentions.net. Will be linked to that website. And I have to say that this is a fascinating subject because I myself, being a Reiki master, my wife and I, we took the trainings back in the late 90s. We were taught, and this goes to what you've been talking about throughout the program, when you send the energy, whether it's to the person, say, laying on the table or what have you, usually a massage table, what have you, or if you're sending it what's called absentee, and you send it for the you just send it for the intention that the individual or situation asks for. In other words, you do not direct it. You just are supporting them in whatever they want to do. Case in point, my father's brother. He was diagnosed with cancer. So we said we'd like to send him an absentee healing. The word healing in there, okay? So they gave us a photograph. My wife and I sat in our living room and we sent the energy. I took maybe 30, 40 minutes, whatever. At my uncle's funeral, my mother told me what happened shortly after we had sent it because they knew when we were going to do it. And she told me that he got very angry and threw his medication across the room, got in his wheelchair, wheeled across the compound, the ranch where they lived, to his son's dwelling, went in, and they had, I guess, a time of closure. And obviously he passed, which then raised the question, well, this was an absentee healing. But see, that was my intention. And yet, I've come to realize, following the passing of my wife's nephew, who also died of leukemia just this past prior to Christmas, I got the realization you don't lose. You know how you hear people say, "Oh, he lost his battle with." You don't lose. You can't lose that battle because if it goes into remission and goes away, you've won, as it were. And if you pass away and you leave the body, you've won because you're free of that body that is, quote unquote, contaminated with those cells that are not productive for the overall efficiency of the human machine, as it were. What about those kinds of things where I want to send you this energy? I'm giving, this is a gift. You do with it what you will, as opposed to, I want you to use it for this and this purpose. Has anything along those lines been done?
Yeah. I think I think that the purpose of sending intention is to help another human being in the way that is best for them.
Hmm.
I think certain people have a particular malady that they need to have fixed, if you will. So,
Hmm.
one of the early experiments in this field at Stanford University was they had a couple of a shaman on the East Coast and in an AIDS clinic in the peninsula with about 80 AIDS patients that had the highest form of AIDS. Uh, they took half of the population of patients and sent intentions remotely for them to heal. And in the target group, many of them showed dramatic improvement in their basic human systems, if you will,
Hmm.
and none of them died. in the control group, about 10% passed away, which was a typical percentage of mortality for people with that stage of AIDS,
Hmm.
and the conditions of their vital statistics did not improve. And so healing is actually the traditional form by which we use intention to impact other people. Healing, as it turns out, is a very powerful use of sending positive energy to someone else.
Mm. You know, it's interesting because, I kid you not, literally, I just received a text from my niece, my sister's daughter. My sister passed away 3 years ago this March from breast cancer. And then my father, the year after that, followed her. But this is from his daughter, basically saying that my brother in law, my sister's husband, was engaged. I didn't even know he was dating, and I'm happy he was. He was looking for happiness. That's wonderful. And the irony is, the woman he was engaged to, his fiance, just passed away.
Ah,
Just, it's like, I mean, I've got all kinds of questions for the universe in regards to what in the world, or even for my brother-in-law, in that regard. It's like, wow. I mean, he lived with he and my sister were married for over 40 years
wow,
before she passed. And
wow.
again, so it's really interesting to watch these events take place in the world, in particular. But even within our own families, and we want the best for everybody, and so forth. And that intention is certainly there. But sometimes I wonder about the universe's plan. You know, how we make plans and God laughs. And I have to wonder sometimes when you talk about this intention, and I suppose you could use the term divine intervention in certain situations, or maybe there were, I don't know if you remember this, Pat Robertson, many years, I was back in the 80s, I think it was. I think his ministry headquarters were in North Carolina, and there was a hurricane bearing down. And he got his people together and they prayed, and the hurricane actually veered off. So the question there is, can intention have an impact on the natural world? I mean, we are part of that natural world too. What are your thoughts, and any experiments been done in that regard?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the we started the conversation talking about seeds, right? Which is the
Yes.
natural world.
Hmm.
And that's a kind of a basic experiment. We've also seen over time that a shaman holding a vial of water can actually change the chemical composition of water. In the same regard. I'm familiar with the story you shared. Another example of that is 10,000 transcendentalists meditating, coming into the city of Boston, I believe, and meditating for reduction in crime every year for the past decade. Right as the summer comes in, the weather changes into summer from cold to warm. Crime increases in the city by about 25% for whatever reason.
Wow.
And they had about 10,000 transcendentalists come into the park and meditate for lowering crime, and the crime rate dropped by 50% while they were there.
Mm.
So, I think all of these things are indicators of our interconnectivity. What one and you've mentioned a couple times in this conversation, uh, your kind of connection between, let's say, God and our intentions, the universe and our intentions.
Hmm.
So this is a fascinating subject because since Charles Darwin, and the origin of the species was written, science has been kind of pulling away from religion, traditional Western religions, and today it's coming kind of back full circle as a potential, scientific explanation for what some people may consider, as God, and I'll give you an example of that. So there's a famous experiment in physics called the double slit experiment. You can look it up, but in essence, in its very simplest description, if I were to put a slit, in a wall, and on the other side of the wall there'd be a white screen, and I shot a particle through that slit onto the white screen, in theory, a dot would appear where the particle hit the white screen. Okay.
Hmm.
And if I then put two slits and shot a particle through that each of those slits, then on the other side on the white screen, there'd be two dots.
Hmm.
Now, if I shot those two particles through these slits without observing them, in other words, if I left the room, shot the slits, and I came back and looked at that white wall, I would see waves. I would see a wave pattern, not
Hmm.
two dots. I'd see
Hmm.
a wave pattern. So this experiment perplexed scientists for years and years, and finally they came to the conclusion that there is a duality to all things, which is they exist both as particles and as waves of energy.
Hmm.
Everything in the universe has a dualistic nature to it.
Hmm.
And what's fascinating about the experiment, and this is like the mind-bending part of this, is that our observations, our minds impact the outcome. When I
Hmm.
watch, I see a particle. When I don't, I see waves.
Yeah.
This goes to a very core concept that is being debated right now as we speak, which is we are actually not only participants in our lives, but creators of our lives. And if every particle has a dualistic nature, then what is that level of existence prior to discovery, prior to it being a wave or a particle?
Hmm.
What is that existence? That is called superposition. And the superposition of all things is the potential of all things in this simple conversation to either be a wave or a particle. But the potential of all things, some scientists would argue, is God.
Hmm.
And therefore, scientifically, we can actually look at a particle or a wave as the world that we're creating around us. In fact, Einstein challenged this early thinking at the latter part of his life by saying, "Are you mean to tell me that if I look at the moon and turn my body around and look away, that the moon does not exist?" And the theoretical physician at the time said, "That's correct." Now, we all know that the moon exists. And yet, does the moon exist? Now we're talking about crazy theoretical physics here.
Hmm.
Does it really exist? Or does it exist because we've been told that it exists? We've been told that if you shoot a particle through a slit, we're going to see a particle on the other side.
Hmm.
And so now the question is, in our conscious minds, how much of everything that exists right now is real, or how much of it is the creation of our minds? So here's another great quote. If mind and matter are complementary forces of creative evolution,
Hmm.
then we share a connection between the individual and the world that are bound in a shared destiny forever.
Hmm.
So that's a powerful thought, and you held back on me. You didn't tell me you were a Reiki master. I mean, this is we're talking about going right at that experience in philosophy, with guns ablazing.
Well, then that raises one final question here before because we do need to wrap things up here because I know you've got things you've got to get to as well. How much of what you have just shared has to do with our perception? For example, 9/11. I wasn't there. I saw what was on TV, and I will tell you the first thought that went through my mind as soon as the TV came on and those images came on was, wow, Hollywood this is amazing CGI. This is incredible. And there's still accusations of conspiracies and so forth, but I wasn't there. So I don't know if it really happened. I'm not questioning it. I'm just posing this theory that if I wasn't there, or if my back was turned to the position where the moon is supposed to be, it doesn't exist in my perception until I turn around and I focus on it with my eyes.
I think that I think that what the theoretical physics is challenging us to actually consider is that our minds help create our reality, and that we are bound together by energy and particles. All of us,
Mm-hmm.
individually and collectively, we're all living in one system.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I do advocate is that when you talk to astronomists who spend their entire lives and educations glaring into the universe, trying to find some semblance of life as we know it, and they haven't found any as of yet, I would also just ask us to think, this thing that we have on Earth is a pretty good thing here.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of creating sustainability, and the idea of loving our Earth and nurturing our Earth as we do ourselves, probably has a pretty good outcome for all of us to exist and sustain ourselves into the future,
Yeah.
versus the opposite.
Yeah.
It would say that if we don't actually look at all of us on this earth as one system,
Yeah.
and we continue to figure out how to battle each other or destroy each other and the environment, the result is not going to be a very good thing.
Not very good at all. I will also tell you that my metaphysical primer I read at the age of 17, and I've read it hundreds of times, and was gratified to hear that the only book, this book, that Steve Jobs had on his phone, his iPhone, I'm sure, was Autobiography of a Yogi. And it is a fascinating tale, if you will. However, there's another fascinating tale. It's the Human Performance Intention Experiment, a quantum field framework.
It's available on
Intentions.net.
Amazon.
Is it available in Audible yet?
Not yet.
Then we need to talk, as I
Okay.
produce them. It is Topper Taylor. He is my guest, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I want to thank you, Topper, for joining us here on Tell Me Your Story with the Human Performance Intention Experiment, a quantum field framework with the website of intentions.net. I would love to have you back again to continue this conversation. And even though I think you've probably maybe directly stated, but also implied how we do this, okay, I think it would be good to have you back to talk about some of the practical ways of doing it, practical applications in our day-to-day lives. I've said to the universe, from a financial standpoint, monetarily, if you will, I am content, and I want more, and I want to start with $100,000. And I already have a plan for that. I have a list. And I'm putting that intention out to the universe, not to an individual or a group of people, although I love the secret, as you make reference to as well. Someone told me that the law of attraction, for example, you do not draw to you, you are drawn to the people, the experiences, the opportunities, and we need to be open to them. So I think your conversation about intention, I think it's great, and I would love to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I want to have you answer three final questions that I ask all of my guests at the end of the program. And the first of those is, who is Topher Taylor?
So I am a excited and a dynamic human that loves to learn and that believes that we're here to learn and grow and contribute to society. So my motto in life is to find your best self, be your best self, and share your best self.
What gets you up in the morning?
The excitement to practice what I've learned and continue to learn every day, just like I've learned on this podcast about you and your vision of life.
And finally, what was your best day?
Ah, every day is my best day because I celebrate every day that comes.
Well, I thank you again for joining us, and I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Mike, I am glad I was in your life. Doug, thank you. I will see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.